1. Economic policy supporters often credit Trump with boosting the U.S. economy through tax cuts, deregulation, and pro-business policies during his first term. 2. America First approach. Trump's America First philosophy appeals to those who believe in prioritizing U.S. interests, especially in trade deals and foreign policy. 3. Tough stance on immigration. Many support Trump for his strict immigration policies, believing they protect American jobs and enhance national security by controlling illegal immigration. 4. Judicial appointments. Trump appointed 3 conservative justices to the U.S. Supreme Court, shifting its balance. Supporters believe this will lead to long-term conservative rulings. 5. Tax cuts. The 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act lowered taxes for corporations and individuals, which appeals to voters who favor smaller government and more personal income. 6. Deregulation. Trump rolled back environmental and business regulations, which his supporters see as reducing bureaucratic red tape and allowing businesses to thrive. 7. Pro-business policies. Trump's business-friendly policies and corporate tax cuts were seen as boosting entrepreneurship and job creation, particularly in industries like energy and manufacturing. 8. Foreign policy successes. Supporters cite his administration's negotiations with North Korea and the historic Abraham Accords between Israel and Arab nations as positive diplomatic achievements. 9. Strong on law and order. Trump's tough stance on crime, especially during times of civil unrest, appeals to voters who prioritize law enforcement and public safety. 10. Trade negotiations. Many believe Trump improved America's global standing through renegotiating trade deals like NAFTA, replaced with the USMCA, which he argued were fairer to American workers. 11. Populist appeal. Trump's anti-establishment rhetoric resonates with many working-class voters who feel ignored by traditional politicians. His "drain the swamp" message continues to attract supporters. 12. Nationalism and patriotism. Trump promotes a sense of national pride, often emphasizing American exceptionalism, which appeals to voters who feel strongly about national identity. 13. Strong economy. Before COVID, many voters point to the pre-pandemic economic growth, low unemployment rates, and stock market gains under Trump's administration as signs of his effective leadership. 14. Second Amendment rights. Trump is a strong advocate for gun rights, and many of his supporters back him for his commitment to protecting the Second Amendment and opposing gun control legislation. 15. Opposition to socialism. Trump's anti-socialist rhetoric resonates with those who fear the growth of socialist policies, such as Medicare for all or Green New Deal proposals. 16. Rejection of political correctness. Supporters often appreciate Trump's straightforward, unfiltered communication style. Many see him as a refreshing change from politically correct politicians who they feel are overly cautious in their speech. 17. Military strength. Trump increased military spending and promoted a strong defense posture, which appeals to voters who value a robust military presence globally. 18. Energy independence. Trump pushed for energy independence through policies favoring oil, gas, and coal production, which appeals to voters in energy-producing states and those skeptical of the Green New Deal. 19. Tax cuts for middle-class families. While much of the focus has been on corporate tax cuts, Trump supporters point to the tax relief provided to middle-class families as a reason to support him. 20. Fighting against the establishment. Many of Trump's supporters believe he fights against the traditional political elites and Washington establishment, viewing him as a champion of the average American against career politicians. These reasons reflect why many Americans might feel that Trump's leadership, policy stance, and overall approach resonate with their personal beliefs or concerns about the future of the country. However, just as there are reasons to vote for Trump, there are many who find reasons not to support him. Would you like to explore those next? Donald Trump's economic impact during his presidency, 2017 to 2021, is often a subject of debate, with both supporters and critics highlighting various outcomes. Here's a comprehensive look at the major aspects of Trump's economic policies and their impact. 1. Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, 2017. One of Trump's signature achievements was the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, TCJA. It lowered the corporate tax rate from 35% to 21% and provided temporary tax cuts for individuals, primarily benefiting higher-income households. This contributed to business investment. Initially, the corporate tax cuts spurred some investment, particularly in sectors like tech and energy. However, critics argue much of the tax savings were used for stock buybacks rather than significant increases in wages or long-term investment. Individual tax cuts. Middle-class families saw modest tax reductions, but many of these provisions are set to expire in 2025. 2. Pre-COVID economic growth. The U.S. economy saw strong growth prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. GDP growth. Annual GDP growth averaged around 2.5% during Trump's first 3 years. Although this was in line with previous years, Trump promised 3 to 4% growth, which did not materialize consistently. Stock market boom. The stock market reached record highs during Trump's presidency, particularly benefiting investors and those with retirement savings in stocks. 3. Unemployment and job creation. Under Trump's administration, unemployment rates reached historically low levels before the pandemic. The unemployment rate dropped to 3.5% in early 2020, the lowest in 50 years. His supporters cite this as evidence of a strong job market under Trump's policies. Wage growth. Wages saw modest growth during his term, particularly for low-income workers. However, critics argue wage growth was not significantly better than trends started under the Obama administration. 4. Trade policies and tariffs. Trump's economic strategy also heavily focused on renegotiating trade deals and imposing tariffs. China trade war. Trump placed tariffs on billions of dollars worth of Chinese goods, aiming to reduce the U.S. trade deficit with China and bring back American manufacturing jobs. This led to retaliatory tariffs from China, hurting American farmers and exporters in industries like agriculture, technology, and manufacturing. USMCA. Trump renegotiated the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, replacing it with the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA. While similar to NAFTA, the USMCA made some adjustments favorable to U.S. automakers and labor protections, which was seen as a win for manufacturing sector's impact on businesses and consumers. The tariffs increased costs for some American businesses, particularly those reliant on foreign supply chains, which passed costs on to consumers in certain sectors. 5. Deregulation. Trump pursued widespread deregulation, especially in the environmental, financial, and business sectors. Environmental deregulation. Trump rolled back regulations related to environmental protections, such as the Clean Power Plan and restrictions on drilling. Supporters argue this boosted industries like oil and gas, creating jobs, while critics claim it harmed long-term sustainability and climate initiatives. Financial deregulation. He also reduced regulations on banks and financial institutions, arguing that it would spur economic growth by reducing burdens on businesses. 6. Infrastructure and investment. Trump campaigned on a massive infrastructure overhaul, though it was not fully realized. Failed infrastructure bill. While there was bipartisan support for infrastructure improvements, no comprehensive infrastructure bill passed during his presidency, despite several initiatives. 7. COVID-19 pandemic and economic fallout. The COVID-19 pandemic caused a sharp economic downturn during Trump's final year. Economic contraction. In 2020, the U.S. economy shrank by 3.5%, marking the worst downturn since the Great Depression.Unemployment Spike. Unemployment soared to nearly 15% in April 2020 due to lockdowns and business closures. Though it began recovering toward the end of the year. Stimulus packages. The Trump administration passed significant stimulus measures, including the CARES Act, which provided direct payments to Americans, expanded unemployment benefits, and loans to small businesses. These efforts were widely seen as crucial for stabilizing the economy during the crisis. 8. Federal deficit and debt. Under Trump, the federal deficit and national debt increased substantially. Tax cuts and spending increases. The tax cuts, combined with increases in military and domestic spending, caused the deficit to balloon. By 2020, the deficit reached $3.1 trillion, driven heavily by pandemic-related spending. National debt. The U.S. national debt rose from around $20 trillion in 2017 to over $27 trillion by the end of Trump's term. 9. Energy policies and independence. Trump's administration sought to increase energy production, particularly through fossil fuels. Energy independence. The U.S. became a net exporter of oil during his term, achieving energy independence for the first time in decades, thanks in part to deregulation and increased oil and gas production. Renewable energy neglect. Critics argue that Trump's focus on fossil fuels hampered the growth of renewable energy industries, which could have been future growth sectors. 10. Support for small businesses. Trump's policies aimed to benefit small businesses, particularly through deregulation and the Paycheck Protection Program, PPP. During COVID-19 PPP loans, the PPP provided forgivable loans to small businesses to keep workers on payroll during the pandemic, which helped many businesses survive the economic downturn. Challenges with implementation. However, some critics point to implementation issues with PPP loans, where larger companies initially benefited more than intended small businesses. Summary of Trump's economic impact. Positives: pre-pandemic economic growth, record low unemployment, stock market highs. Tax cuts and deregulation spurred business investment, particularly in certain industries, strengthened American energy production and achieved energy independence. Trade renegotiations, especially with the USMCA, provided some benefits for manufacturing. Negatives: increased national debt and budget deficits. Trade wars, especially with China, led to increased costs for some businesses and consumers. The pandemic led to a deep recession and high unemployment in 2020. Wages, job creation, and overall economic growth did not exceed long-term trends, and inequality remained a concern. Trump's economic legacy is marked by robust growth before the pandemic, but substantial challenges, particularly in 2020, with debates over the long-term sustainability of his policies, particularly regarding debt and inequality. Your psycho-philosopher.